Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Today we are going to be discussing my top 10 favorite books of all time. And what we're going to do today is I am going to give a summary of each book, but I'm also going to give a quote of each book. They're super mild spoilers, nothing that gives anything away. They mostly just give you a good sense of what the world is about and what the book is about. So let's get started. The first book we're going to talk about is 19 Minutes by Jodi Picoult. This book centers around a school shooting. We get multiple timelines where we see before the shooting, we see during the shooting, and we see after the shooting. And we kind of follow the court case as everything kind of plays out. We get to see all of the things that lead up to the school shooting, and we follow multiple perspectives from the town. We follow cops, we follow lawyers, we follow the students, we follow the shooter's mother, we follow the judge. And the main person that we're following is Josie, and she was a victim of the school shooting, and she doesn't remember the shooting at all. And it is her mother that is trying the case, and she knows the school shooter very well. And this book, it really has a discussion around identity and prejudice and how we treat people. And it discusses how we can get to those desperate places. And I love Jodi Picoult's writing because of the fact that she discusses really hard topics, and she makes it to where either side could be very legit. And in her book, she follows people who are very close to the subject. Like in this one, we follow the mother, and how does a mother respond when it was her child who caused so much chaos and so much heartbreak to this community, knowing that this community also broke his heart and caused him a lot of turmoil. And it's just, she is so good. The quote for this one says, "I know how difficult it can be when the image you've had of something doesn't match its reality, when the friend beside you turns into a monster." It's so good. And so, number 9 on this list is going to be A Man Called Ove. And this book is by Frederick Bachman. And he does a really good job of slowly showing you the narrative, and he never tells you anything outright. He always says it in a way that makes you assume, or you kind of get pieces and then you kind of figure it out as you go. And so Ove is a grouchy old man who wants to be left alone, who wants to do things his way. And if you're not going to do it his way, then you might as well get out of his way because he's going to do it his way. And he calls people stupid all the time. And he is so grouchy. And it's so much fun to read from. And he will capture your heart because it's not that he means to be grouchy. He's going through a hard time and he sees the world a certain way, and nobody else sees it the way that he sees it. And because of that, he butts head with a lot of people, and he's very old school of, I'm going to do what I say. And like, there's no ifs, ands, or buts. If this is what's supposed to happen, this is what's supposed to happen. And he believes in having skills and being able to back up a trailer. And it's, he's, he's a fantastic character to follow. And his quote totally sums up his snarky attitude. And so his quote says, "Ove feels an instinctive skepticism towards all people taller than 6 feet. The blood can't quite make it all the way up to the brain." This is what he says. He says these kinds of things all the time, and it's so entertaining. I just love it. Frederick Bachman is the greatest thing ever. So, my number 8, I actually have physical copy. Six of Crows by Leigh Bardugo. This book, I think I discovered it In 2020, I also discovered BookTube because of this book. And this follows a group of these 6 characters. And it's basically like a teenage gang. And Kaz is like the leader of like their little sect. And then he's got a boss over top of him. And he is described as monstrous and he's a demon. And they call him Dirty Hands. And he will do the darkest things. And him and his friends, a lot of them are thieves, and they are commissioned to pull off an impossible heist. They are supposed to go to this impossible prison and break this dude out of jail so that they can have his scientific abilities to create this drug. Because this is in the Grisha universe, and what Grisha are is they basically have powers. And so this drug will like make them times 10 for their powers. And so the person who hires Kaz and them knows that this drug cannot be in the hands of certain people. And so they hire Kaz and his friends to break them out. But the thing is that they're not all friends. And because of that, we have a lot of banter and a lot of them calling each other stupid and one upping each other and getting on each other's last nerve. And it's so much fun. And I love a found family sort of thing. And I love a heist. Oh my gosh. Anytime that there is a heist sort of similar to like Ocean's 11, where you think you're on the same page, you think you caught up, and you're not, and they trick you, it's my favorite thing. And this will do that. And I fell in love with this series. And it was actually what started me down that darker path, because this is probably about as dark as like young adult can get. And I just loved it. Never thought I would like grimdark at all. And for teenage young adult stuff, this is probably pretty dark. And now I'm reading Joe Abercrombie and Game of Thrones and John Gwen and all these things, and I love when things get darker. And it's just really good. And even though it is a young adult book, it doesn't read young adult. That's actually probably one of the bigger complaints, is that they don't sound teenagers. Yes, they did grow up on the streets and they're orphans and they grew up in gangs. And so they've been hardened by the streets, but they definitely don't sound like teenagers. So that is probably a complaint. But so, let's see. The quote for this one is one that describes Kaz. And it says, "There was no part of him that was not broken, that had not healed wrong. And there was no part of him that was not stronger for having been broken." He is, he makes the story. Like, without him, the story wouldn't be what it is. And that quote describes him perfectly, because he is broken. He's broken emotionally and physically, and he will one up you. He will not be held down. He will not be shunned. He will not be crossed over. He will come out on top, because that's just his personality. And that's just the nature of growing up on the streets. And so I love it. Number 7 on my list is House Rules by Jodi Picoult. This one follows Jacob, who is on the autism spectrum, specifically Asperger's, and he has a special interest of forensics. And so what he does is he'll have his little radios, and they will let him know when there's a crime scene happening. And he will go down there and he will tell the cops exactly what they're doing wrong. And he's right most of the time. Like, he is always inserting himself into these crimes. And it ends up that this girl that he knows ends up dying. Like, she's been murdered. And everything about Jacob points to the fact that he's the one who did it. And they keep reading his body language and the fact that he's not looking them in the eye, and he's fidgety and all these things. And they're like, it was him. He had to be the one to do it. And so we follow Jacob as he is dealing with the fact that the cops are suspecting him, and his mom is dealing with the fact that the town is accusing him and shunning him and making them feel horrible. And then we also follow his brother, Theo, and Theo has lived his whole life where it's not normal because of his brother. And so for him, this is just another thing that's not normal because of Jacob. And I love this book. I love Jodi Picoult and how she can talk about these really hard topics, and she can explore them in a very sensitive way. And I not on the spectrum, and I don't personally have family who is on the spectrum, but it seems to me that she did a really good job of showcasing what that is like for the person themselves and for their loved ones. And so their quote is, "It's never the differences between people that surprise us. It's the things that against all odds we have in common." I love Jodi Picoult. If you've not read anything by Jodi Picoult, you are truly missing out. She has all kinds of stories from the Amish to nurses to um, people who need transplants. Like, she's got stories all over the board. And so I'd highly recommend pick any one of them, and they're going to be fantastic. And so number 6 on the list is The Friend Zone by Abby Jimenez. This is one where we follow Kristen, and we also follow what's his name? Josh. And Kristen and Josh met when she was helping her friend plan her wedding, because Josh is in the wedding party. And they banter and they don't like each other, and it's so much fun watching them become friends. And they start to end up falling for each other, but Kristen has a boyfriend, and Kristen knows that she has to have surgery for health reasons. And because of that, she can't have children. And she knows that Josh wants a lot of children. And she thinks that he's better off without her, that he's better off finding somebody else. And so she's dead set on keeping him in the friend zone. And he's okay with that at first. But then, when you fall in love with somebody, you want to be with them. And he doesn't know that that's the reason why he's friend zoned. So a little bit of miscommunication, but it's done in a very good way to where it's not annoying. And so this quote is, "I'd never met a woman like you before. You told me to go to hell and made me look forward to the trip." And so, like, it's just like that. Like, they just banter, and, she says things like that to him all the time. Especially when she's angry and she's, like, hungry. He's got to give her food. And he, like, knows that, and he clicks with her really well. And they mesh so well together. And so I really love them. This next book is The Grace of Kings. And this book is so hard to explain because look at this. It is massive, and we follow so many different characters, and there's like a bunch of short stories about a bunch of different characters that you follow. And Ken Liam, he does a really good job of making you fall for every single character, and you really care about every character in just a couple of pages. And you really feel for their stories in just those couple of pages. But so, because this book is so hard to describe, I'm just going to read you the back of it because it makes it so much easier to understand. So, we're following this country of Dara. Dara was once divided into 7 kingdoms with shifting alliances and constant battles, a tempest of diverse dialects and cultures. A relentless king united the 7 lands into one empire. Some thought it would bring peace and end the turmoil. Instead, it brought stagnation, suffering, the anger of the gods, and a rebellion. Kunigaru is a wily bandit who is more concerned about being well liked than the affairs of the empire until he meets his match, Jaya. This free-spirited daughter of a well-regarded family sees greatness within Kuni. Driven by her love and touched by the grace of the common people, Cooney sets out on an unlikely path to heroism and perhaps a daring wager against the gods. Matta, also, side note, I don't read the pronunciation guide, so if I'm pronouncing everything wrong, that's just how it's going to be. Matta, the last scion of a family of renowned generals, is favored by the gods. Standing 7.5 feet tall, broad shouldered, and double pupiled, he looks like a hero out of ancient legends. Determined to reclaim his stolen heritage, he catches wind of a revolution and begins a journey to become the greatest warrior of his age. Cooney and Matta become fast friends, and they wage separate wars against vast conscripted armies and silk-draped airships in order to wrest Dara from cruelty. Fans of intrigue, intimate plots, and sweeping battles. And so much intrigue, so much backstabbing, so much of one-upping each other and outsmarting each other. The characters in these books are impressively smart. And if you enjoy people outmaneuvering each other, this is it. This is what you need to read because they outmaneuver each other at every turn. And it is so fascinating. And I love it. I'm getting ready to start book 3, and I cannot wait. And so, this quote says, Emperor, King, General, Duke. These are just labels. Climb up the family tree of any of them high enough, and you'll find a commoner who dared to take a chance. And that completely describes some of these characters. They take a chance and they do wild things, and things happen. And it is so much fun. It's the best thing ever. I just love it so much. Number 4 on the list is The Shadow of the Gods by John Gwynne. This book follows these Viking war bands. One is just a slave trying to seek refuge in this war band, and he is also trying to figure out what happened to his sister and trying to get revenge for her. And we also follow this other girl who is in a separate war band, and she's trying to get fame and get glory and kind of show her family that she's worth it. And then we also follow this mom who is on a journey to find her son who has been kidnapped. And she's also on a journey of revenge too. And meanwhile, there used to be like a god war where these gods kind of fought and they like destroyed the country and destroyed each other. And now they're being resurrected and the god war is starting again. And so these 3 kind of get swept up in this god war. I mean, look how massive they are. And John Gwynne's writing is fantastic. I will scream it from the rooftops in every single video if I have to. But it's very fast paced. It's great characters. Like, I love when we can have a battle scene and I can laugh in the middle of this battle scene. And that's just how John Gwynne writes. And I absolutely love him. He's just fantastic. And so, the quote that I found for this one says, This is a world of blood, of tooth and claw and sharp iron, of short lives and painful deaths. And that pretty much describes it. Like, it is not an easy world. People die at every turn, and they die brutally. Some of these will, like, they have animal blood not animal blood, but they have god blood in their system, which the gods are animals, they're shapeshifters, and they will fight like animals sometimes. They will bite you and rip your limbs off. Like, it's very gross, but that's just how it is. It's very dark, and I just love it. So, the next one is the Age of Madness series by Joe Abercrombie. This is series 2 in this world. And so the Blade itself is the first set of series. and then he's got a set of standalones, and then this series. I would recommend starting at the beginning just because of all the little pieces that connect this to that. And it's easier to appreciate where a lot of things are and like a lot of the symmetry and how things kind of come full circle if you read the first set. But so this one, we're following more in that industrial age. We're following different characters. He always does multiple characters. And we're following like rich and the poor, and we're following soldiers, and we're watching them as the entire society gets corrupted, and we're having to deal with that, and we're dealing with chaos, and we're dealing with people manipulating each other and backstabbing each other, like to the point where at one point the two characters are like, you betrayed me, I betrayed you, okay, cool, that's fine, we'll be friends, like, because that's just how it is, like, it's fine. I mean, it's not fine, but that's just the way of the land. Like, everybody is out for themselves. There's no loyalty at all. And it is so dark. And Joe Abercrombie does a really good job of sort of exploring what it happens when we mistreat people and then they rebel. And now everything kind of hits the fan and we're just in chaos and destruction. And his character work is so good. Like, his character work is probably the best that I've seen. And you really feel for all of his characters, even though they are horrible, horrible people, you're going to love them. You will absolutely love them, even though they are absolutely horrible people. And that's just how good of a writer he is. Like, you don't care that they're horrible, you will follow them to the ends of the earth, anyways. And so, this quote really describes how dark it is in this story. Guilt is a luxury reserved for those still breathing, and with no unbearable pain, cold, or hunger demanding all of their fickle attention. I mean, when you're in this world and you're surviving every day, you don't have time to feel guilty. You got to look out for yourself and you got to do what you're supposed to do in order to survive day to day. And that's just the way that they feel about things. And it's it's so good. I just love it so much. So my number 2 is Faithful and the Fallen by John Gwen. Love John Gwen. This one we follow Corbin, who is he's a young boy who just wants to be a knight in his country, or well, his town inside this country. And he ends up getting swept up in this god war that's happening. We've got 2 separate gods who are battling it out. Each god picks their own avatars, or they call them champions in here. And each god has their basically like angels and demons that are sort of doing their bidding. And there's a prophecy, there are fantastic animal companions, there is coming of age, there is loyalty, there is betrayal, and being manipulated to the point where it's like, I can't even blame you for being manipulated because it was done so well. And it's a very classic fantasy story. We follow lots of perspectives from both sides of the war, which I love. I love when a story follows both sides of a war because I love like finding those characters that I love on both sides and then being devastated because I don't know who I want to win now. And there's some of that in here, and it is such a good story. This was actually the very first like classic fantasy that I actually read. So I couldn't guess nothing. Everyone says that it's very traditional. I had no idea at all. I actually found this in a bookstore because like the white spine really stood out to me. And then I really like the sword on it. I'm really obsessed with swords. And so I bought it and then I read it. And I'll be honest, like it didn't really stand out at first. It was kind of fine. It took me about 200 pages to like understand everything because there's so many characters. And that's the first time that I really read anything with that many characters. And after I finished it, I just kept thinking about it and could not get it out of my head. And so I read the next ones and was just obsessed. Like, I love this story. And this is what started me on the John Gwen fan club. I will read anything John Gwen puts out. I even read the second set of these because there's like a continuation series in this world. I read those, and everyone says that they're not as good, but I loved them. I'm fangirling all the way. And so it's so good. I'm currently in the middle of a reread, and I just finished the third one, and now I just got to read the fourth one. But so this quote really sums up like the mindset of this world and like the side of the good people and who what it means to be loyal and to keep your word. And so the quote is, whatever your cause, lies are a coward's way, and they are like poison. They bring death, death of trust, death of honor, death of respect. And so, like that one just that hits like, don't lie, because we don't want to have death of honor and death of respect. Like that just hits hard. And so, the very last one in this series, I mean, I've already talked a ton on this channel about, so I won't go too in depth, but it's Bear Town by Frederick Bachman. And this is about a hockey town, and the town is dying. Like, there's nothing really happening in this town. And so, because of that, the town has put all this pressure on this hockey team because they're the only good thing happening in this town because they're getting ready to play for like this national tournament. And like they could bring more business to the town, they could bring more people to the town if they end up doing really well. So this hockey player ends up raping a little girl in the town, and it blows up. There are some people who react very well and supportive of her, and there are some who were like stoning her because she wanted it and all these things. And like Frederick Bachman goes there, like he does not pull any punches. He will he will accurately represent the worst of the people in the town. But he also represents the people who are there and who are loving and who will go to battle for you. And this makes me cry every single time. And we follow lots of different people throughout the town, and we follow each of their perspectives before and after. And we sort of get to see how this situation impacted each of them. Because it does. When this kind of thing happens on such a public scale as this, there's no way it doesn't impact other people. And because of that, we also get to explore things such as loyalty and what does it cost? At what point do we not need to be loyal anymore? And it explores fitting in and how laughter can be inclusive and exclusive at the same time, which I never would have thought of until this book. And he discusses the culture of sports and the culture of towns and what we allow people to do and how they become what we allow them to be. And he just does it so well. And like with the last book, he doesn't give things out directly. He gives you pieces and lets your assumptions sort of play against you. And he allows you to let your mind go to these places and see your own biases. And it's just fantastic the way that he does it. And I could not recommend this book more. Like, it is fantastic. And so, the quote that I found for this one says, it doesn't take long to persuade each other to stop seeing a person as a person. And when enough people are quiet for long enough, a handful of voices can give the impression that everyone is screaming. It's just so good. It's so good. Like, there were so many quotes for that one. Like, I had a hard time picking because there's just so many good ones. And Frederick Bachman is my favorite writer for a reason. Even though I love John Glenn and I will scream his praises, I gotta go with Frederick Bachman as my favorite. And it's just how he writes, it's his prose. And it's just he isn't too flowery. He just like gets in there and twists your heart. And he will rip your heart right out of your body. Like I cry every time I read his books, like every time. It doesn't matter if it's a reread. I've read Beartown 3 or 4 times, and I will still tear up at Beartown. Like I did my video on it a couple weeks ago, and I was tearing up just doing the research, finding quotes for this book. Like I didn't have to reread it, and I was already tearing up because this book just hits me so hard. And I think part of that is because of the fact that I, one, work in mental health. So, like, I see things like this all the time. And two, I also coach. And so I also have those thoughts and those perspectives of how much do we allow? Like, what do we allow them to get away with? And how's that going to impact them in the future? And so we have those conversations all the time. And I think that that's probably the biggest reason why it impacts me as much as it does. And it's just, and Frederick Bachman's writing is just, it's fantastic. So, highly recommend any Frederick Bachman book. Actually, I mean, I highly recommend any of these books on this list. But if you're only going to read one, I would read something by Frederick Bachman. He is just fantastic. You will not be disappointed at all. But so, yeah, those are my top 10 of all time. What are some of your favorites? Let me know in the comments, and I will see you in the next one.